A large part of this documentary's focus is on Brandywine Springs Park. The park is located at Falkland Road and Newport Gap Pike, about 5 miles from Wilmington, Delaware. Today, Brandywine Springs is a county park. It features several pavilions, a couple of baseball diamonds, a basketball court, a playground, and a bunch of hiking trails through the woods, with a lake and a stream running through it. The area was originally a traditional encampment for the Lenni Lenape people. In the summer months, they would use the area for hunting and fishing. It had natural freshwater springs throughout the area, as well as an iron and sulfur-rich mineral spring, typically called a chalybeate spring, derived from the Latin word for steel, chalybs. Legend has it that Native Americans thought the water had curative powers. One legend says they would travel from great distances to drink the water to cure illness. Another legend says that General George Washington mustered his troops under an oak tree at the park before the Battle of the Brandywine. Because of this legend, the oak tree became known as the Council Oak. The area was originally called Yellow Springs and was a small part of the property included in the 15,500-acre tract William Penn gave to his daughter, Letitia. The property was cut up and passed hands several times until it was purchased by Ephraim Yarnell. After his death, the property was willed to his son, Horton Yarnell. Now down to 147 acres, Horton turned the home along Route 41 into a tavern, catering to the drivers of Conestoga wagons that would travel from Pennsylvania to Newport to ship produce. By 1816, Horton found it to be economically unfeasible to continue running the tavern and tried to sell it. After 10 years finding no buyers, he was forced to sell the land and buildings at auction. The property was purchased for the sum of $2,805 by a group of men who created the Brandywine Chalybeate Springs Company. They used the name Brandywine Springs instead of Yellow Springs because the Brandywine River was well known outside of Delaware. In 1826, the company started bottling the mineral water to sell as a medicinal cure. It was reported that it tasted and smelled like rotten eggs. They also built a grand hotel called the Brandywine Springs Hotel. The hotel featured spacious dining rooms, parlors, halls, extensive piazzas, and was surrounded by pleasure grounds. This company only lasted until 1833. The property was then sold to Matthew Newkirk. He made extensive renovations to the hotel and the grounds. He built a large reservoir and a pump house to supply the hotel with water. He hired architects to remodel both the hotel and the grounds. He also built a home for himself fashioned after the hotel, and 2 smaller houses on each side for his 2 daughters. The resort thrived until the financial panic of 1837. No longer could the wealthy afford to summer at the hotel. For the next decade and a half, people tried running the hotel, but no one could turn a profit. In 1853, Newkirk leased the property to Captain Alden Partridge, who opened the National Scientific and Military College. Captain Partridge is widely recognized as the father of the ROTC movement. Unfortunately, over Christmas break of 1853, the hotel burned to the ground. A month later, after a sudden illness, Captain Partridge passed away. The property sold a few more times and was down to about 60 acres. In 1855, the property was bought for about $5,000 by a hotel operator from Philadelphia named Peter Coyle. He decided that another hotel should be built, but lacking the funds to build another grand hotel, Coyle took the homes of Matthew Newkirk and his 2 daughters and combined them together into a new hotel. Now, this hotel was more like a country boarding house. Families would still come to the park for meetings, parties, and picnics. Even without a grand hotel, Brandywine Springs remained a popular place for visitors until the Civil War. On the auction block again, the property was bought by the Fell family, owners of the Fell Spice Mills. They intended to donate the property as a boarding house for young ladies. However, the church turned down the donation and the family would be saddled with the property for decades. They leased the park to several different people over the next 30 years, but it never turned a profit and the area fell into disarray. The banks of the reservoirs were washed out, and all that remained of it was a field and the old abandoned pump house. With only an old rundown hotel, several small cottages, a dance pavilion, a long-forgotten mineral spring, and a railroad station for the Wilmington and Western Railroad, there was very little interest in going to the park. Then, in 1886, the Fell family leased the hotel and grounds to Richard W. Crook. The park finally had someone who could see its potential. This enterprising young man stopped advertising the mineral springs and instead focused on attractions it had to offer. Mr. Crook dreamed of building an amusement park down on Hyde Run, with a restaurant, roller rink, boardwalk, games, booths, a carousel, and other amusements for the families. He rebuilt the reservoir into a lake big enough for 100 rowboats. However, this dream presented two separate problems. One was to figure out how to provide the concessions, games, and amusements, and the other was how to transport people to the park. He added a boathouse so people could rent canoes to row on the lake. He also built a large dance hall and many smaller pavilions and pagodas. Slowly but surely, Mr. Crook transformed the park from simply a place to have picnics, dances, and to try medical cures into a grand amusement park. In the spring of 1901, a trolley line, the People's Railway, laid track from Wilmington to Brandywine Springs. On a high trestle, it crossed over the B&O Railroad and the Red Clay Creek, then turned towards the park. As the trolley approached the entrance archway, it made a right turn along the hillside, then it continued until it made a complete loop through the park. As you got off the trolley, you would see the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad station next to the railroad tracks. Next to that was a large archway built to greet visitors, with the words, "Let all who enter here leave care behind," on its face. Next to that was a dance pavilion that served many different uses over the years. Continuing along the path, you would pass a ladies' change house, then you would come to the carousel. Next to the carousel would be the swings. On your left, you would then find N. Duchesne Cloward's movie theater. Moving on, you would pass the post office and then cross a long bridge across Hyde Run, the stream that runs through the park. As soon as you crossed the bridge, you would start up the boardwalk. On your left was a roller coaster called the Toboggan Ride. Of course, the concessions and other features changed from year to year. As you walked down the boardwalk, you could see many games and shops. First, a hot dog stand on your right, then a shooting gallery on your left. Next would be a photo gallery where you could buy tin-type photos of yourself run by Ira Friedman. Then a Ring the Duck game, Nick Jones's popcorn stand, and then a soda stand. After that was a large outdoor theater. The theater had plays, shows, and bands and was very popular. Across from the theater was a trolley terminal where you could catch trains back to Wilmington. After that was a large restaurant, then the entrance to the Scenic Railway, a second roller coaster that carried you out over the lake. Depending on the year, you would then find either the Egyptian Labyrinth or you'd pass a funhouse called the Katzenjammer. Then you'd find a pool hall that had a sign inside saying, "Games open to everyone." And then immediately on your right, you would find games and a small restaurant. As you crossed over the creek again, you came to the rear of the boathouse. Located there was Sela's soft drinks and candy stand. Also, there was a set of steps leading up to the boathouse. This area was a place for picnics and parties. And then finally, you would come to the old Calibia Springs, the mineral springs that Brandywine Springs first became famous for. Brandywine Springs thrived for years, but as people were able to afford automobiles, the novelty of a trolley park wore off, and it finally closed in 1923. But after its demise, a funny thing happened. The park was gone. All that was left were a few concrete foundations. But interest in the park continued and grew. Starting in the 1940s, many books were written about the park, and people started collecting postcards or anything else they could find. Today, the Friends of Brandywine Springs cares for its memory. They do archaeological digs, they put up markers, and they put up picture posts reminding people of the history of one of Delaware's favorite places.